Hi, hello. I'm Professor King Lun Yong. I'm hosting the panel 3. I'm a professor at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. So the panel, we have a number of experts, practitioners, as well as academics, okay? And we have a representative from the industry. We have Lenny Connell, okay, from Veolia, and he's the leader of innovation and digital projects. And we have Professor Davis Bookhart, okay, which is head of the sustainability unit at HKUST. We also have Professor Gil Laforge from Toulouse School of Business School. He's professor of economics. And we have Anthony Boisin, as well as Janice Wong, okay, from UniLaSalle. And finally, we have Danielle Souchet, who is professor of physics from Department of Ecole Polytechnique. Okay, so let us welcome all the panelists. Before we start, like the topic for panel 3 is actually the challenge of decarbonization, which is a matter of skill and innovation. So the first thing that I would like to kick off and let the panel provide some insight, okay? What does different stakeholder understand by the word decarbonization, okay? From the point of view of a company or corporation, to that of a practitioner, to someone who's in the academic doing research, and as well as a student learning the skill, okay, of the coming like century, okay? So let us start off with the company representative, okay, with Mr. Connell.
Yes, hello, thank you, Professor Yang. I would say that it can take many forms when we are a company like Veolia involved in resources, management of water, of waste, of electricity. And decarbonization for us is a way to avoid the emissions of greenhouse gases in general and CO2 in particular, by finding ways to reuse resources that have been used before. So it can be by producing green energy from waste, for instance. It can be also from recovering greenhouse gases such as methane and introducing them into the network that will be then be used by other partners, or it can be also very simply by improving the efficiency of systems that usually consume more energy by centralizing, such as, for instance, district cooling or district heating. So that would be the short answer for me. Yeah.
Thank you. So let us go to a practitioner. Can I invite Professor Bookhart to kind of provide his kind of particular take on the decarbonization?
Okay, thank you. I think just in general, an idea about, we were just talking earlier about decarbonization as one of the great opportunities for value creation in our lifetime. We're talking about complete transformation of our economic system, and that's very scary, and we don't know exactly how to get there. But we also know that this transition is going to create a tremendous amount of new industries and new businesses, new entrepreneurship. It's going to create some wonderful areas. So I think that as a practitioner for us at the university level, we're really looking at this as a great opportunity to get in and think about how decarbonization is a pathway forward that we should be embracing, because this is really where our students and our graduates are going to be getting into this field.
Yes. Then I think Professor Laforge can add a little bit more, okay, especially regarding the economic aspect of decarbonization.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Yes, upon the economic aspect, upon the economic part, in fact, the challenge of decarbonization is on the fact that for the moment, up to now, all the carbon emitting solutions or options in order to produce energies, to produce manufactured goods, are most of the time cheaper or still cheaper than all the carbon-free options that we can deploy. Okay, and so for the economist, the challenge is in fact to create the good incentives to people or to market or to economies in order to counterbalance this relative competitiveness of the carbon-free options.
Yes,
and so
you.
all these incentives can take the forms of specific policies, subsidies, taxes, emission trading systems, or social norms, or nudges, many aspects of such incentive policies.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I invite Professor Suchet to talk a little bit more about like are we technologically ready nowadays to embark on this decarbonization project globally?
Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, hello everybody. The question of technology is of course a key issue when it comes to decarbonization, which in the most generic terms is really attenuation strategies to mitigate climate change. With respect to what has been said before, and also to answer this specific question, I think there are two additional points which could be highlighted. The first one is that we have to decide what is the perimeter which we take into account. And are we talking about, when we talk about decarbonizing a given sector, we have to be very careful not to bring outside of this sector additional emissions, which can be outside the accounting which we perform, but still inside the atmosphere. The point which has to be highlighted in the same way is what do we decide to keep and what do we decide to change? Are we talking about trying to keep the same kind of usage services and reduce their impact? Are we talking about keeping the same kind of usage and services and try to take out the carbon which has been emitted when providing them? Or are we talking about changing the usage and services themselves? And depending on these questions, the answers to the technology tools which we have can be very different. There are tools which exist for each of these levels. There are tools which exist to remove carbon from the atmosphere. There are tools which exist to improve efficiencies. And there are tools which exist to try and reduce the amount of services which we're considering. And in every case, we should have a very careful analysis of how the technology which we consider is going to match or not the expectations which we have.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, can I invite Professor Bossin and also Ms. Wong to kind of talk a little bit about like how academia, okay, and university can help, okay, the students, okay, to basically prepare themselves for the new skill sets that will be needed, okay, in order to go into this new era of decarbonization.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so my colleagues talked already about all the parameters about the topic. It's quite interesting. So technically, yes, as a university, we need to adapt to two factors, which are or three factors, let's say. Number one is what is required by the company in terms of skills. For example, more knowledge of all the topics. When we said parameters, for example, it's to sequestration of carbons, because for our point of view, it's more life science or agriculture-based skills. So how we do the sequestration, or how we work on the waste materials, or on the bio-based materials. The number two is, of course, the consumers. When we talk about our students working on the startups and developing new skills to adapt to people more conscious and more careful about their consumption in terms of food, in terms of textile, as we have seen in the last panel. So this is also I think to tackle. And the last one is, of course, policies. We talk about this also, I think, later. How do we adapt the students and we prepare them to these new policies, which are changing very fast, and but they also have our students have conscious of all the different topic, as maybe Janice will add about her master in urban agriculture and green cities, which is also a topic which is having more and more importance in our current world.
So, okay, then before so what I can get from the overall discussion is that in order to make decarbonization something that is viable and sustainable for the future, we need not only the policy push, but also the economic pull, okay? And that is more or less balanced by the available, okay, technology and skill, okay? So what I would like to do now is to invite like each one of the panelists to kind of share their own experience in this particular area. So first, I would like to invite like Mr. Cornell. You may share your slides if you have one.
Sure. Okay, no problem. All right. It's coming. All right. All right, and I think it's visible for everyone, right?
Yes.
So the very first slide here would be just for those of you who are not maybe familiar with what Veolia does. It's an environmental services company involved mainly on 3 types of activities. There are more, but these are the key ones: water quality, waste management, and energy services. So we're involved with supplying drinking water, for instance, for close to 100 million people. We're involved with collection of domestic waste, for instance, municipal waste. Oops, sorry, for lots of people as well, and as well in the production of energy, and more specifically green energy. So when we are talking about decarbonization, it is really part of virtually every activity that we may be involved in. All right, and in the specific case of Hong Kong, since this is one of the focus here today, we, for instance, in the area of Qingyi, are involved in hazardous waste, which in that case we are treating hazardous waste, but also producing then energy from that through the help of a turbine. If we're talking about the the technology aspect of it, that is then used in the plant itself. There's also a landfill. Something that people might not know a lot about landfill is that there's a significant amount of the work about collecting gases. The gases that are emitted by the waste, and these ones are then fed into the network as well. So that is also a way to avoid the emission of greenhouse gases and reuse them and replace some of the gas that would have come from a different source. There's also sludge incineration. Here we're talking about wastewater sludge that are directly basically creating and producing energy, which is fed into the grid once again here. And then there are a number of projects involving energy efficiency and how buildings, and we all know that Hong Kong is quite keen on its buildings that are consuming a lot of energy for their air conditioning, for their lighting, etc., etc. And that also involves in the optimization of the energy usage. So all of these activities, everyone involved will therefore, in some kind of a way, be working towards the interest of decarbonization. All right. So more specifically to your question and the type of skills that might be that will be needed in the future here. So there are a number of things. In Hong Kong, we have 800 people working. Out of these 800, more than 700 are actually blue collar jobs, okay? People, operators in plants who are actually have a very hands-on job. And these jobs in the future will most likely evolve more and involve more robotics and automation in order to remove operations from really the hearts of the plant where they are in contact with waste, for instance, and remove them more and more. But it will also involve data science in order to work on the optimization of these jobs. Okay, the objective here is to evolve more, and it is the case in our industry, and I'm pretty sure it's the case in a lot of industries, to involve more into towards autonomous plants where we will try to avoid having people in contact with anything that might be harmful to them. Okay, and for that, I would say that there are different types of profiles that people will be more and more looking into. First, of course, some technical people. Should it be someone qualified in chemistry or in fluid mechanics or in other type of jobs? But that can also do other things, okay? The ones that can also code, for instance, maybe 20 years from now, 20 years ago, sorry, it would not have been uncommon to have someone in the office dedicated to spreadsheet, to working on Excel or Lotus 123, as it may have been known at some point. Okay, but the others in the office were not. Okay, there was one or two people dedicated to that. Nowadays, it would be crazy to think that someone would not know how to use Excel. Okay, my guess here is that 20 years from now, coding, it will not be on Python anymore. Most likely something else will be more fashionable by then. But being able to code in Python or JavaScript or some kind of equivalent would be something completely common. And this is completely something that we would expect from everyone, right, in the future, as well as having hybrid profile who also know about finance and engineers who know a lot about what a CFO knows now. Okay. Second thing is being able to look at the academics and the other people here in this panel, looking at academia and be able to direct the innovation and the research, which is quite often done internally in a company, but go and get to you or to the startups that you guys have helped in breeding in order to look for the innovation. And finally, the last thing I would say, and the year of COVID 2020, which is not yet over, would probably prove that this will be a requirement. More and more we'll be looking at very autonomous type of workforce who are able to work alone, and that's specifically a challenge when we recruit young people from the university, because a company and an office is something that is a structuring effect in any type of career, and more we'll have less of that. So that also is a typical skill that we will be looking into, and therefore for all these things that I've mentioned, we would rely a lot on academia in order to train people at knowing all these things. That would be all for me.
Thank you. So I would like then to invite Professor Bouckaert, okay, to kind of share his experience in this area.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, my pleasure to speak with everyone this afternoon. It's a great, very important topic and something that we've been thinking about quite a bit. So I'm going to talk about two different things. First of all, what does it look like for HKUST? I wear two hats here. I do a little bit of work on research and teaching, but I also am focusing on taking the enterprise itself and trying to transition into a more sustainable, carbon-friendly institution over time. So let me try to do a little bit of both. The key area that's really impacting us right now is trying to find suitable pathways forward towards 2050. We know that the grid will get us part of the way there. We know that the introduction of more renewables into the grid, the reduction of coal on the grid, it's all going to have a good point, but there's going to be a gap that's left over that we'll have to fill some way. When we look at the current technologies that we have right now, we recognize that there's certain things that we can do, and that will start to shrink that gap as well. And one of the big areas is solar PV. It's something in Hong Kong that's now really getting a foothold. And you could see that it becomes a sizable chunk in our graph. But again, it doesn't really quite get us there. So one of the key focus areas for us in terms of decarbonization is to really build up our capacity to look at how are we transitioning, and doing so in ways that's not incremental. You can't change light bulbs to carbon zero. You really have to fundamentally change what you're doing, which may mean fundamentally rethinking what an educational institution like ours does. And we've just done that. Obviously, we just are coming out of, I hope, this global pandemic, and almost at the drop of a hat, we went from from in-person teaching to online teaching. And we were able to make that transition really just within a couple of weeks, and then over the next month or so that we were able to continue to tweak it until we got it to a point where we were satisfied. So we know we could make big changes in a hurry. The question is, can we make some big changes without the gun to our head, the way that we did? So it means that we need to be looking at things like, what are the heavy footprint of carbon that we're responsible for? And there's certain things that we do that have a very high carbon impact, and they're really embedded. So for example, if you look at our laboratory research, very energy intensive, very heavy footprint, very difficult for us to undo that. On the other side, we use tracer gases to try to see, if things are working very well. Very light footprint. If we can just replace that tracer gas, you could see it has a very, very high carbon impact. If we can eliminate that, it won't really change the way that we operate. But of course, we see some other things that are kind of mixed in between. So for us, the biggest thing on our plate right now is our solar project. This is because the government has changed the rules in terms of incorporating a feed-in tariff. And so we really have a great opportunity. When we started looking, we knew that we didn't have any big spaces for renewable energy, but it turns out we had lots and lots and lots of little spaces. And if you add them all up, it turns into a fairly large project, which will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by about 1.5 million kilograms of CO2 per year. Will generate about $160 million in feed-in tariffs over 13 years, and it'll generate an income stream that we can funnel right back into energy efficiency projects. So something that we think that is quite important for us. But as an educational institution, I also wanted to talk about skills, because that's one of our topics today. We've done a bit of looking into what is it that we want our students to be able to do when they leave? We know certain things, like students today are statistically likely to go into at least 3 or 4 different career paths during their career. So training them to be very good, marketing professionals may not be the best way to train them. So, but better yet, should we be looking at their experiences? And so we turned that into a research question. We know that that typically universities have coursework which kind of provides the information that students need. And if we look at sustainability or decarbonization, broad introduction focused coursework can help raise the awareness of some of these issues, but we think that it would end up with a fairly shallow knowledge and not necessarily the tools that are needed to be able to do things with that information. So then the second question is, how about if we were to look more at content specific skill building coursework and really reinforce those skill buildings over 4 years through experiential learning, through hands-on projects, through really getting people to work on something and fail. Failure is actually a very key component, because you learn a lot more from failing than you do from succeeding quite often. And then be able to really show your competency through your final year projects. So we've had a couple of surveys that we've asked employers in Hong Kong to just give us a little bit of advice. And the 2 questions are, what advice would you give to a student? And then the same question, except what's important to your business? And what we're really looking at is our businesses going in certain directions, and that's separate from what they're looking for in the students, or are they asking students to really get prepared for something, but their businesses aren't quite ready for them yet, but they see it coming? One of the biggest eye-openers for us, almost 70% said the most important attribute is inquisitiveness and willingness to learn new things, which actually makes sense, because I think that the thing that students need to understand is you're going to do different things. You may be working on a decarbonization project today, and if you work at Veolia, you might be working on a waste reduction project tomorrow. So you need to be open-minded and willing to learn. If we plot these out, the one things that we found were that the soft skills, the ability to communicate, the ability to think in terms of strategies, those were always at the very, very top of what companies were looking for in terms of skills. And not far behind it would be hard skills. Systems thinking was one of the most important, being able to look broadly. And of course, if we look at the climate change crisis right now, it's a systems crisis. It's because we didn't incorporate externalities. It's because we're not looking at how actions on one hand are impacting things on the other hand. So really trying to see the causes and effects, seeing how the big picture works, how the system is incorporated. Is clearly one of the biggest issues I think that we can teach students. And then I guess one thing that I thought was very interesting in terms of specific knowledge, you see a little bit more of a vertical orientation here, which I think means that from a business perspective, a lot of knowledge that a person needs can actually be learned within the business itself. Right? If you need to learn more about how to deal with our HR system or put the accounting into, you don't need to learn that in school. We can teach you that in the business. But businesses, it's much more difficult to teach things like how to communicate well, how to express yourself well, how to team build well, how to look at systems, how to understand things like life cycle and those kinds of analyses. So I'll wrap it up right there and leave it for the rest of the panelists to fill in from here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Davis. I would like to invite Professor Laforge, because just a moment ago, Professor Burkhardt had mentioned the push coming from policy being a huge incentive, okay, for HKUST to embark in this large PV project, okay. So from the economic side, how can we make this a more sustainable, okay, effort, and that can be translated globally, okay, across different type of economies?
Okay, thank you. I share my screen. Okay, yes, my purpose today is mainly to be pedagogical with a key question, a key issue when we talk about climate change mitigation policy, is the question of carbon pricing. Most of the time, people think that carbon pricing is in fact a tax that will penalize their purchases, their behavior, etc. But it is not really the case. In fact, I would like to share my own experience as a member, appointed member of the French National Carbon Commission during two years. It was a commission governed by the first French ministry. And the objective, the challenge was to design the trajectory of the implicit carbon price from now up to 2050 in order to join and in order to drive the France in his objective of decarbonization. Okay, and this objective, as many other European countries, is to reach the net zero, to reach a net zero target by 2050. Okay, so most of the time, all these quantitative targets, net zero target, carbon budget, emission standards, etc., are not able. The policymaker is not able, has not power enough to implement and to make that people, firms, consumers respect by themselves these targets. Usually, we need some policy support in order to implement these quantitative targets. Okay, the fact is, in fact, most of the time, all these targets, in order to be reached, in order to be respected, need to deploy some technologies, some what we call abatement technologies, devices or technologies aiming at reducing carbon emissions. And these technologies are costly. And up to now, most of these technologies are not competitive yet, faced to carbon emitting or traditional technologies. And so in front of this cost of carbon abatement, we need to assign, we need to give a value of what we save in terms of carbon emissions. Okay. And so in order to make the balance between the cost of mitigations and what we save by reducing emissions, we need to assign a carbon pricing, or what we call an implicit price to carbon. Okay. It is under an economic point of view, the meaning of this carbon pricing is quite simple. When you assign some quantitative target, for instance, you must reach the net zero target by 2050. It means that as long as you emit carbons, you consume your carbon budget. You consume the carbon, you have the right to emit, to still emit up to 2050. And exactly as when we deal with an exhaustible resource, oil, coal, or natural gas, as long as you consume your carbon budget, the remaining part of this carbon budget becomes scarce and scarce. Okay, and there is an increasing effect of scarcity, and so the remaining carbon, which is not yet emitted, has a value which increases through times. Okay, you can make the parallel with the non-renewable resource exhaustion. Okay, and the parallel with the scarcity rent or the oil rent or the so under an economic point of view, this parallel justifies the fact that we assign a carbon pricing, an implicit price to carbon. Now, when we agree on this aspect, on this objective to assign an implicit carbon pricing, the economists can compute this pricing in several ways. The historical ways to compute the pricing is what we call the Pigouvian way, is to put in front of the emission of 1 ton of carbon emitted, the damages, the climatic damages, which are generated by this emission. Okay, it is a traditional historical way to proceed. However, when dealing with climate change, the damages are quite difficult to assess. Most of these damages have not occurred yet. Okay, we have a good knowledge about the type of damages, but it's quite difficult to assess them, to estimate them in the long future, in the long run. Okay, so a more practical, a more operational way to assign a carbon pricing is what we call the shadow price of carbon, is to put in front of the ton of CO2 we avoid to emit, the marginal cost or the cost of the abatement technologies or the abatement options which is required to avoid these carbon emissions. Okay, and by putting in front, by confronting the value of this carbon emission and the abatement cost, we define what we call the shadow price of carbon. Okay. Of course, this shadow price of carbon, as it is based, okay, it is so to sum up, it is computed from two things: from the quantitative objective we have assigned, we must reach, and second, from the current state of the technology, from the abatement costs which is required to avoid these carbon emissions. But when dealing with all these abatement technologies, for instance, can be a green energy device. can be to produce electricity from solar PV instead of burning coal, or can be to deploy electric car, instead of thermic car, whatever. The list is very long. But when we deal with this abatement technology, of course, the technical change is central. It has a key role. We play a key role in this deployment. Because of this technological change, we automatically have to think in the long run or in dynamic perspective. And so defining a single value for the shadow price of carbon is not enough. We have to design a trajectory of this carbon price, in order to join the deployment and the technical change of all the abatement technologies. So it is exactly the role of the Carbon Commission to try to compute this type of trajectory. And when we get this trajectory, so in this slide on the right of the screen, you can see exactly the trajectory of the shadow price of carbon obtained by the Carbon Commission in France. So the current level of this shadow price is 50 euros per ton of CO2, and you have up to 2050 the trajectory that this value must follow in order to make France reach its net zero target by 2050. So what is important to understand that this price is not a tax. This price simply will serve as a guideline for both public and private investments. At any point in time, because reducing carbon emission is costly, a private actor or a public policymaker must be able to compare what is saved by deploying a specific technology. And so it must be used as a guideline for all this investment deployment. But if the policymaker wants to implement this carbon value on markets, at this stage, it will need a specific price support policy, taxes, subsidy, emission trading system, etc. And the difference between the market price signaling and the shadow price value is very important. And if I have two minutes left, I would like to finish. I would like to mention that my institution, so the Toulouse Business School, has opened in 2020 a specific program, which is called the Climate Action Program. And it is in fact a 3-year elective program for students in management and in business, in order to make students more than familiar with the climate change issue. We develop approximately 100 hours of course containing the science of climate change, all the technologies of greenhouse gases emissions, some economics course. We teach some green finance and accounting course, etc. And so it's in the business school. Most of the business school, of course, aware with this issue, but only a few of them develop a specific diploma on these topics. So, and Toulouse Business School initiates its own program. Thank you very much for your attention, and do not hesitate to ask me questions. Thank you.
So Professor Laforge had basically set the tone in terms of the importance, of setting the right price, that we are willing to pay to secure our future, in fact, the future of the whole humanity, So I think it's a way for us to have a specific objective, just like train as an engineer. When you do optimization, you need to have a specific objective in order to reach your goal. Okay, now that we have set up like the policy and the economics dimension of decarbonization, the question that I have, what type of innovation in technology in order to meet these challenges? And I believe Professor Chauchet may probably be the best person to comment on this.
Thank you very much. At least I'll try. So I would say that as a scholar, my perspective on this question essentially relies on three pillars. It is research per se, and it happens that my research activities are oriented towards solar energy. So I hear a strong echo with the points that were raised before. The second pillar of our scholar activities is, of course, teaching and training future generations, and this is what I'd like to focus my presentation on. And the third thing, which I still want to mention, even though it will just be one sentence, is the importance of scientific dissemination, of talking to the large audience, a larger public, about these issues, because it cannot remain only between people of science and policymakers and economists. We have to talk to the large audience and make sure that this knowledge is as spread as possible. So what I would like to share with you is indeed what we believe are the key ingredients to address innovation, research, and technology issues, and the way we try to train our students for this at École Polytechnique. So École Polytechnique is an old institution in France. It's more than 200 years old. It was created initially as an engineering school, and so we have a very strong technical backbones. And I do believe that these basic science backbone is required if you want to address technical issues. We have seen, and I really agree with what has been said before, the importance of adaptability, the way that you know what is important when you train students, but you don't know what is going to be important in 10 or 20 years. But in any case, the laws of physics will remain the same. And so having this basic knowledge is extremely important and can guide the line between what is feasible and what will remain a technical dream. Starting from this engineering background, the École Polytechnique has developed several programs which are intended to the international community of students as Masters of Science and Technologies, and it addresses a broad range of topics. And I do believe that these two aspects, international opening and interdisciplinary perspective, is important, because students that will enroll in one of these programs will be in contact with students working in other fields, addressing other issues. And while I do believe, and I have decided to dedicate my research and teaching career to climate and environmental issues, other topics are, of course, also of great interest and cannot be addressed completely independently from one another. And I do believe that bringing together students which have complementary concern is a great wealth to everybody at the same time. What I will focus on more specifically is this energy, environment, science, technology, and management program in which I'm most involved and which I think is most relevant for the question which is addressed today. And so what it takes to perform the innovative and disruptive approaches which we need for science and technology to address these issues. Well, to me, really, there are three things. The first one I already mentioned, which talks to me most, probably because of my own training, is the scientific expertise. It has been addressed before how specific knowledge, for instance, can be brought up within the industry which is going to need that specific knowledge. And I totally agree with this. I think, however, that acquiring during your training some specific knowledge, even though these might not be the knowledge you will use in the future, can help understanding what is so specific about this expertise and why expertise cannot be replaced by something else. And so this again relies to the scientific backbone of the program, which is sometimes surprising for students when they come here. But we believe that if you want to address climate change or energy-related topics, you need to have notions about thermodynamics, for instance, which there again will set the frame. The second point, which I already mentioned also, is the interdisciplinarity of the training. If you want to talk about energy production, it's much more than simply energy engineering. The question of costs has been very well explained just before, and I really agree with what has been said. Social issues as well, policy-making issues as well. If you want the innovative or research proposal which you come up with to make sense, it cannot be elaborated without taking into account the context in which it is going to take place. And this also leads to the third point, which is critical to me, which is that these are highly complex issues. There is not one single solution which could be deployed everywhere and solve every problem at the same time. Such miracle doesn't exist and will not exist. And this is not what the energy transition is about. So it's much more than just trying to shift from one producing technology to the next producing technology without changing anything else to the system. It was said before, it will require a more complete transformation of systems, both economic systems, but also technical and physical systems. And so this requires to open towards other perspectives, to take into account the specificities of each situation and to try to link these specificities to the technical backbone that was acquired in the first place. So to me, these are the three main things regarding innovation and research.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I would like to invite Anthony Boisin and also Janice Wong to kind of discuss a little bit about the skill set, okay, required by, that you think that will be required in order to face the new era of decarbonization, okay?
Okay, thank you very much. So let me put this in, you see my screen, that's fine. Yeah, so thank you. So I think it's quite interesting to see already all the different point of view and perception on the topic. From our side, as an engineering school in France, the environmental topic, the movement to this topic, of course, was already present in the 90s and in the last 20 years, but the real change was made about 10 years or 15 years, where we started to implement the environmental topics inside all our fields, even if some of our fields were, of course, already related to this, because when we do have some students who have some interest to environmental topic, to carbon topic, and they don't see the link with agriculture, for example, where it's really it's 1/4 from the emission are coming from agriculture. That's why it's interesting, and that's why we started to implement really environmental topic and environmental policy also inside our institution. So we have this historic background of the 19th century already, with life science, of course, but now we also go further with other engineering topic, for example, on new energies, even on food and health, on sustainable development, and also in the industries. However, today I will be more in the topic of agriculture and food, where it's our main expertise at the school. For us, there are several challenges related also to carbon. So first one is that we are currently around 7 billion. In 2050, we will be about 9 billion or 10 billion people around the world. So as I said, so agriculture and food industry is responsible of 1/4 of the emission, and sometimes even more if you calculate with some other factors. So it's how do we prepare our planets to adapt to this growing population in terms of food production, in terms of agriculture production? How do we use also this is since the COP 21 and even a bit before, but at the COP 21 was more important about sequestration of carbon, and as talked about Mr. Laforge, also about the shadow issue of the carbon, for example, on this topic of sequestration. Feeding is for us one of the main of the main topic, but what people do forget often is also the part of the bio-based materials. Of course, if you have 9 billion to 10 billion people in 2050, we can say that there is the need for food, but there is also a need for textile, there is a need for cars, and so on and so on. And for example, if you change from plastic to flax, textile, or other plants or bio-based materials, you will need more people to have the skill, and you need to find more innovation. So that's why we go from the food to bio-based materials. Of course, the number 2 is also to promote progress. So we go from the analysis of the soil to your plate, to the plate of people. So in these different steps, for example, you can have emission with the fertilizer. You have here we're on the production side. You have emission on the phytosanitary products, and after you have in the logistics sector, and of course in the last one, in the plastic that you use for the marketing of products and so on. So here our work is really to work on find solutions, find alternatives for these emissions. We have also new policies in France, a new label, for example, on the low carbon. Next year, normally farmer will have an analysis of their carbon footprint, for example, of carbon print of their farm. Industries are now more working with farming, with the topic of conservation agriculture, for example, to work on this carbon issue. And the last one is, of course, develop the territories. 9 billion people or 10 billion people around the world is a huge issue in terms of space, as we have seen also in Hong Kong with the solar elements. So how do we adapt on the fact that we have less and less land also? So from our side, I will focus more on 4 master that we do have, where we that we propose in English, even if we have more programs in French on the different topics I talked before. Here, for example, on our master of science, data management in food and agriculture, we talk about this the topic of Mr. Lenny talked also, fact that there is a need of engineers who have a good knowledge of life science, but now also of data. You cannot rely only on people having a knowledge of informatics. That's why we created this program after the request of the companies to be at this as the cutting edge of technology and agriculture and food industry. Moreover, if we analyze this climate change on the soil, on the rain and so on, farmer or the industry needs to collect more data to adapt quickly to this climate change, which is not the same, as we said, in different areas. For example, in Hong Kong or in France. But number two, we do have sustainable management and eco-innovation. How here we are at the end of the different steps I showed you. It's the part of how do we work on the eco products, on the eco-friendly products. How do we train people to be part of the sustainable department in the company? How do they change things inside of the company? Because companies are sometimes relying on their old knowledge, or they have, or mainly on the policy. But how do you go further on the topic, or how do you adapt to the next 10 years changements? The number three is the plant breeding. Here we're also working on the crop varieties. With the climate change, we need to adapt with crop varieties which are more resistant, for example. Also, if you want to reduce the fertilizer, if you want to reduce this carbon, you need maybe plants which need less fertilizer, for example, or the best is no fertilizer, for example. And the last one, we'll let after Janice talk about this, the master also, is we said we have less and less place to grow things, and we have more and more population. How do we use this, our urban areas to reduce the carbon, for example, to reduce the logistics, go from the production to the consumer? And in terms of green cities, we are facing a huge problem with climate change inside cities. How do we make our cities greener and more comfortable and more, let's say, livable for people? Maybe Janice, who is an awardee of the French Embassy and also in the program, can share also a point of view on the topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you mentioned, like Janice is in a very special position because Janice is one of our alumna from HKUST, and I had the opportunity to actually teach a course to her. Okay, so I think she can do some sharing regarding like what type of skill training that she had received from both here in Hong Kong as well as in France.
Yeah, so thank you, professors, for giving me the mic. So I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, so I'm Janice, and I graduated in 2019 from HKUST, Environmental Management and Technology. And it is a very broad-based education, and actually I transferred from business school from first year to this program because, as Professor Suchet has mentioned, like scientific knowledge is very important when it comes to managing plants, like environmental, industrial plants and different things. So I decided to go into a more scientific path, which also has the angle of business in this major. And then I worked for 2 years as a data analyst at a Hong Kong social business. And then since in these few years, I got to experience a lot and met a lot of people from different disciplines in HKUST. So I got to sort of mold my, my path in terms of climate change mitigation, since I realized there are a lot of people that are very interested in climate change technology, especially carbon sequestration and business like green finance, etc. But the problem of food production in Hong Kong, especially in more and more cities are growing bigger, and they are relying. Hong Kong is like 98% imported food, so you can see there isn't much of a resilience in Hong Kong. And I personally believe agriculture is a very good way to absorb waste and a lot of resources, and also reduce our energy emission, because we have all these gardens, we have all these water, that we are using so much water on gardens, plants in a beautiful real estate complex already. But if these water are actually spent on food production, then that would actually achieve both benefits of creating beautiful places, but also something beneficial for the residents, especially in health and sustainability. So currently I am supported by the French government scholarship to pursue a master at UniLaSalle in urban agriculture and green cities. So my master is about a few things. So we got to learn to design, improve, and innovate different kinds of urban farms to achieve sustainable urban planning. So our courses are from my experience, I categorize it in a few aspects. So we do have a very full cycle development to become an eligible candidate in like a farming industry. Once we got out of school, we can immediately work in the industry. So we learned from theory, technology, business, and ideas. And at last, we'll finish with an internship. So this is something that I think it echoes with what all the professors have been saying, that theory is very important, but also the idea of business viability and also having the ability to innovate and real life experience are very important too. So this is a great program in my opinion. I'm going to share a little bit what I've done so far for the last 4 months of being in the master. For technology, we are taught to use to innovate the way we think about augmented reality, virtual reality for farms. So we did a project on AR for greenhouses, and I think having an education at HKUST really helped me go into this field very easily, because UST has been educating students about technology, high tech, like artificial intelligence, data science and stuff. So this is a very interesting mix of the two aspects. And theory-wise, we also worked on research on urban permaculture's benefit on biodiversity. And these are applicable in many cities, and especially my interest is going to be in Hong Kong, how we can adopt something so new, urban permaculture, which doesn't exist in many places, but we might be able to apply it in places like Hong Kong. And business-wise, we worked with a real company in Normandy to do a consulting project with them. So we got to do sort of communication strategy improvement, and we designed their farms. And lastly, not lastly, but one of the interesting project that I've done is also joining a competition in urban farm hosted by an Italian university to design a full-on farm in Paris. And I think these sort of experience, no matter where you are, is very applicable in just city in general, because many cities are facing similar challenges. Although in France, they have more policies, more education supporting food production in the city, especially. So this is something that I find very interesting. Apart from the academic part, which is also very fun, we also got to do field trips to learn about agro business, and also we looked at urban farms in Paris. And then we self-organized a farm volunteering trip to south of France, not for just for the beach, but also for to learn in real life what it is about to be get your hands dirty in the soil. So actually, you learn much better when you have real things going on in front of your eyes. So that's a good thing about France, because it's so convenient and you can get to anywhere by train, or cars. So the next move is going to be internship and urban farm, potentially in France. And also I'm looking to explore collaboration between Hong Kong and France, maybe UniLaSalle, on sustainable food initiatives. I think Hong Kong has great opportunities to do this, and it is a booming industry. So also encourage everybody to pursue in this industry, or anything about that is in the environmental industry, no matter what you study. I think you will be a very important factor in this climate change battle. So yeah, thank you. This is what I can share.
Yeah, I think there's a constraint in time, but I think Janice, this is a very nice place for you to pitch to you, both Lenny and Davis, Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely,
Quite
definitely,
interesting.
Janice. Let's talk offline afterwards through LinkedIn, because what your experience you have on sustainable food is something that's interesting. In Malaysia at the moment, we are developing a bioconversion project where we transform organic waste into food for aquaculture, and urban farming is also something that is of high interest for us. So let's discuss, let's chat. Yeah.
Yeah, because like the HKUST have a piece of the old like landfill land. I think that we are renting from the government for about $1 Hong Kong for next how many years. That could be a very nice place to kind of implement some of these ideas. Okay, so well, because like the time is we are already past our time, but I was very interested with all the discussion and talk, and I do hope like some of our attendees were also engaged. Okay. However, I haven't received any question from them. So I think like the attendee can also take advantage of contacting some of the panelists through the organizing through the organizer, either through the Consulate or HKUST, if you needed more information. And I think Janice would be very helpful because she had experience on both ends. Okay, so
anytime.
yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so I would like to say good night for participants in Hong Kong, and again, good morning to participant in France, especially it's staying very, very early. Okay, so what time is it right now in France? About 8 o'clock in the morning.
It's 11, almost 11.
Oh, okay, 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 okay. Thank you then. Okay, so bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.